Hi, my name is Elder. I'm currently an entrepreneur in Tokyo, Japan, and I've been an entrepreneur for the last year or so now, and I've sponsored myself on a business manager visa. The purpose of today's video, hopefully, is to provide entrepreneurs all over the world who are considering Japan as a location to build their unicorn startup or maybe their lifestyle startup, and kind of clarify the visa options in maybe the more obscure environment that is Japan. So starting off, we have the startup visa type. With the startup visa, you have a couple of clear benefits and drawbacks. What the startup visa in 2025 entails is that you have a 2-year time window. It recently changed from 6 months to 2 years to be able to establish a business in Japan. Before, they give you 6 months in order to kind of come in Japan, get an apartment, establish a business entity, and with the ultimate goal of just making you transition into a business manager visa anyways. Prior to the new 2025 rules or offering, you were tied to a specific city, right? So there were only certain municipalities that could offer the startup visa. You were tied to those municipalities with your startup activity, so your business had to be located in the municipality that you applied to. And every municipality has different startup business needs. So for instance, a city like Osaka or Tokyo probably wouldn't offer a startup business visa for a restaurant, right? But a smaller municipality, there were upwards of, I think, 16, 20 of them. I think it was roughly 28, but I don't remember. One of the smaller municipalities might enable you to, apply for a startup visa and sponsor you if you were going to start up a business dealing with like foreign foods, right? Kind of diversifying the local offering. Now, what has changed since 2024 to 2025 is the startup visa is for a 2-year time window. So no more, just kind of getting in the country for 6 months and then having to figure stuff out. You have a longer time period to actually be able to test out your business rather than just kind of like a time period to move here, if that makes sense. And instead of you being tied to a specific municipality, it's nationwide. So you can apply and it just kind of opens up the whole country to you to be able to go through and conduct yourself in a startup activities. All right. So let's go through and discuss some of the benefits of a startup visa. 1, again, you get 2 years. 2, you are enabled to go through and kind of conduct business activity. So this means that within this visa type, you are able to generate revenue in Japan. You're also able to go through and kind of do most of the same stuff that you can do with a business manager visa. In fact, for our intents and purposes, it's just about all the same. So those are some of the critical benefits. You will likely, if you are here on a startup visa, you'll likely get access to some maybe more niche governmental support programs, right? Japan is highly incentivized to bring foreign talent from all around the world to start up businesses. The reason is Japanese business culture is very conservative. They're one of the least risk-tolerant countries on the planet. So what you'll see is that there are substantively less businesses, approved by the government in Japan than in a country like the United States. In Japan, I think it's close to about 2 million active businesses currently, whereas in the US, it fluctuates in the 30 million range. So that's 10% of the American population, and it is less than 1% of the Japanese population run businesses. So that's just one way that you can see how conservative the Japanese business mindset is. And so what that means for you as a foreign entrepreneur is there are a ton of new government programs that are coming out for people on this visa type to enable them to do business, so that it help them, right? Give them a leg up. So there's likely tons of grant opportunities for you. There's tons of free co-working spaces, lots of networking, a ton of resources kind of being fleshed out currently in the community when it comes to a startup business type. Now, that kind of fully encompasses my understanding of the benefits of the startup visa. To be fair, I did go through, and most of my learning is from 2024 when I was trying to figure out whether or not I was going to apply for a startup visa or a business manager visa. So I can't say if it's become substantively better for 2025. Really, to me, and what you'll find probably if you're exploring the startup visa is there's not going to be a ton of resources available. right? What that means is you're going to be doing most of the learning as you're applying. And so what we like to say is in Japan, when you're a foreigner conducting business, maybe if you're just a Japanese person conducting business at all in Japanese society, after every summit, there's another beginning to a hike, if that makes sense. So you summit just to see that you have an entire new mountain that is twice the size as the one that you've just summited. So if you find yourself in a position where you're actively applying for the startup visa right now and you're kind of encountering these problems, then my heart goes out to you. If I can do anything to help you out, please let me know. I have talked to so many attorneys, so many startup gurus, so many people in this space, and I understand how difficult it can be. So please feel free to drop a comment on the video or reach out to me personally. I think my email's in the YouTube description. So please reach out if you need any help. So with that being said, I can't say if there are other substantive benefits to the startup visa. But for me, I think that the critical difference between 2024 and 2025 is the 2-year time difference. So you have 2 years now, and you're not tied to a municipality anymore. Now, there are some critical drawbacks to the startup visa that you're not going to be privy to as somebody on the outside looking into Japan. Japanese businesses are not going to want to do business with you until you have a corporate entity set up. Japanese banks are not going to want to, give you a bank account until you have a corporate entity set up. So you're going to run into the same kind of, bottleneck as with the business manager visa. And this is something that I think is really important to understand, is in Japanese business context, in a Japanese business setting, the amount of money that you start your business entity with is very, very important, unless you're a Japanese person or have a citizenship or permanent visa status here. The reason why this is because when Japanese businesses are kind of assessing whether or not they can do business with you, because you have to, declare on your website, and you have to have a website public when you go through and establish a business entity in Japan, because you have to declare how much your starting capital for your business entity is, and that will stick with you for the rest of your corporate entity's lifespan, by the way, right? So because you have to declare how much money that you start up your business with, that is one of the primary measures at the very beginning when assessing startups as to whether or not they're going to be a business entity that you can do business with, right? And so the recommended minimum amount to start up a business entity in Japan is 5 million yen as a foreigner. This is for a number of reasons. That's enough money for you to be able to sponsor yourself on a business manager visa when and if you get to the point that you want to convert your startup visa into a business manager visa. But it also indicates to startup companies or businesses in Japan that you have enough money to stick around long enough to actually do business with them. The more money, the better, right? Because again, that number is going to stick with you. Whatever your starting capital for your business entity is going to stick with you all the way through your corporate entity's lifespan. So when you're trying to do business with larger organizations in the future, or if you're trying to move quickly and buy down the risk of getting buy-in from Japanese businesses, just showing a raw amount of cash that you started the business with and likely have access to really buys down the risk kind of lever when assessing whether or not to do business with your business entity. And so why this is a drawback for the startup visa is even though you're here for 2 years and you have the ability to do business, you will still need to go through, start up a business entity and put in a sufficient amount of capital to be able to sponsor yourself on a business manager visa, typically, in order for you to even start collecting revenue in this country. All right, and whether or not the startup visa gives you the abilities to go through and collect revenue, without a business entity, that doesn't necessarily matter, right? Because Japanese businesses don't really understand the new startup visa type. They are very risk averse, so they're not necessarily looking to be early adopters or buy into riskier startups. You have to understand that within a traditional business structure, corporate structure, they need to get approval all the way from the top, right? And whoever is suggesting the new idea right? Typically you're probably going to be doing business with managers, middle managers for the most part, unless you're lucky and you're able to network with higher level people. If they propose a project, a plan, a new technology adoption, and it doesn't work, then they cannot be fired from that organization. But the shame of maybe losing money for the business, of implementing something that wasted time, can make it so that way their competitors within the organization now have a leg up on the next promotion. Right? And because employment is lifelong with companies, this is starting to change, but it certainly has not changed, right? With Gen Z, it's a bit different, but with how business is still conducted in Japan, this is the case. What you'll see happen is that corporate entities, like people in the middle management or even the higher levels of management, if they take on riskier projects and they fail, then they get jumped by their competitors within the organization for the next promotion. And because no one gets fired in Japan, the next promotion could be 5 years away, right? So you have to wait for people to retire out of the business structure, really, for you to get promoted at higher levels. And what that means is, the risk lever there is really high for buy-in. And so if it comes back, that a business entity spent 10 million yen on a new application and it failed, and they'll look into, whether or not you yourself, right, the entrepreneur, had a business entity set up or not, and they'll see that you didn't have one, maybe. Then the Japanese, entity, the person who is working with you and maybe advocated for you, they get the boot, right? So they lose face, lose status, right? So even if you're able to, and I'm currently not aware as to whether or not, I've read a couple of resources that say that you're able to collect revenue. Again, because it's still early in its latest application, it's going to be a bit opaque. So that's just something to keep in mind, right? You're still going to need to go through and set up a business entity to be able to conduct business in Japan. That's just a reality. So one additional critical drawback of the startup visa is you're way less likely to get approved for it. When it was localized, right, and tied to municipalities, Shibuya, which was the most popular city to apply for a startup visa through, only had a 20% acceptance rate. Now, moving on to the business manager visa and why this might make more sense for you as an entrepreneur to just get started with this, Now, moving on to the business manager visa and just covering like the benefits and the drawbacks of this visa type. So for the business manager visa, you're going to need to have an office in Japan, 5 million yen, and a business entity. In order to get the business entity, you need the office, right? So really, it's going to be office first, 5 million yen in a Japanese bank account or with an accountant, and then you're going to want to go through and start up a business entity with at least 5 million yen. If you have 2 co-founders or are trying to sponsor multiple people in order to start up your business, 5 million yen per head is the traditional amount that you'll need in order to be able to get approved. Anything else, anything lower than that, then you're going to need to have sufficient reasoning within a Japanese context as to why you should be able to get started with less capital. This typically will be a letter of intent from a Japanese business entity to give you a loan, or letter of intent from investors to invest in the new business entity. So just be mindful of that. Typically you're probably not going to be starting off your business manager or your business entity with these assets. So 5 million yen really makes it a lot easier for you. Now, some of the benefits of having a business manager visa: you get to immediately go through and apply for bank applications. These will take some time. Japanese banks are quite conservative. It's not the same like Western, Western nations in terms of the way that bank applications work. You have a very high likelihood of not getting approved. Again, for the same reasons that I mentioned before in this video, Japanese people are quite conservative when it comes to business, and banks are especially and notoriously conservative. So they're not really going to be willing to give you, a foreign national, access to their, their banking entity, right? With the risks of you potentially doing money laundering, taking out loans, and then maybe fleeing to lesser developed nations that you couldn't, they couldn't get access to you at, as easily. And or just for the same reasons I mentioned before, there's the risk of them losing face within their business, corporate structure, right? If they take on a new client and they end up losing the bank entity money for some reason. For example, you go out of business. So, having a business manager visa and, necessarily all the business elements that you'll need in order to conduct business in Japan anyways, already set up, that helps you to move quickly. And speed within, a startup is your number one advantage as a startup globally. Right, in Japan especially, because they move, very monolithically. Like all of society has to move together with changes, right? So you have a critical advantage in the Japanese environment with speed, but you have to play ball in their space, right? So if you were to go the startup visa route, yes, you have 2 years to localize yourself, understand Japanese business culture a little bit better, but you will not realistically be able to conduct business until you go the business manager route. Going back to drawbacks for the business manager visa, you have to have 5 million yen. You have typically a 1-year time horizon, so it'll give you a little bit less time. You have way less reporting. You're way more likely to receive this visa type if you have 5 million yen and a little bit of patience and some time. You can come to Japan on a 3-month tourism visa, depending on what your nationality is. For most Western or developed nations, that is the case. You'll be able to come for a tourism visa. And during that time, you can do just about all of the preparations you need to get started with the business manager visa. If you can get a office, you have 5 million yen, you can contract with an accountant to help store that money in a Japanese bank account, and you can set up a business entity, which you could work with Tozbek in order to do that, then you're very likely to get approved for the business manager visa. When it comes to the startup visa, because it's so new, right, and it's a riskier application that really depends on how well your business plan is, you're way less likely to get approved for the startup visa, right? Right. And so you could spend a lot of time, a 3-month time period, if you have all the capital, all of the resources already that you would need to be able to live in Japan for 2 years, right, which would be about 70,000 US dollars, then it will be a more surefire way for you to apply for the business manager visa, for you to get started in order to do business in Japan, but also for you to receive the visa, right? So, that's kind of the critical difference between the Japanese visa and the business manager visa. Really, it's going to be the case that with the business manager visa, with the application, you'll be able to move more quickly, right, in terms of actually being able to conduct business in Japan versus the startup visa. The startup visa, you basically get pigeonholed into having to go through the business manager application anyways with how it's currently set up. All the same things as the business manager visa, like setting up an office, setting up a bank, or a corporate entity, likely needing to fund it with about 5 million yen in order to show that you aren't a risky business to do business with. Even 5 million is really, cutting it close. More is better. And from there you'll be able to actually conduct business in Japan, right? So, where I personally made the decision to go through, me and my business partner decided to go for the business manager visa was through, how quickly we wanted to be able to operate within the Japanese society. During the time that we applied, also the new 2025 rules for the startup visa didn't apply. And so where you should make the call is if you really need some time to get localized in Japanese business society, need some time to, kind of network, and you have upwards of maybe 100,000 US dollars in capital already, right? then the startup visa becomes a very viable application for you to take maybe a year to go through and just network, understand, and kind of try to validate, at a high level your problem and what you're trying to solve within the Japanese society. Do a couple of pivots, conduct a couple of experiments. You won't really be able to conduct any revenue generate revenue in that first year, probably. And then from there, within the second year, kind of get started with honing in on your business problem, validating it, refining it, getting an MVP out, and then starting a business entity. Just keep in mind that after that 2-year period is up, in order to start generating revenue, you're going to need a business entity, right? I would recommend, because businesses take a very long time to be able to, convert into customers. We're talking a 2 to 3 month time period, with early adopters, right? These are people moving quickly. With corporate entities, larger organizations, you're probably looking at a 9-month time horizon. So you're going to want to get a business entity set up within that 2-year time period by the year and 3-month mark at the latest, in order for you to at least have a shot at not going flat broke by the end of your 2 years, depending on what your starting capital circumstance looks like. And remember, in order to continue staying in Japan after those 2 years, you'll still need 5 million yen in a business entity to convert over into the business manager visa. Alternatively, so localization for that 1 year, you really only get 1 year on the startup visa, in my opinion. Alternatively, if you already know Japanese society a little bit better, or you're looking to maybe launch a business from Japan that serves global needs, right? And you're looking to capitalize off of the fact that Japan is maybe a cheaper society to work in, and it has some higher quality talent that you might be able to hire depending on what field you're in, like robotics or something like that. Then, moving to Japan, moving quicker with the business manager visa allows you the opportunity to be able to actually generate revenue much faster, and in theory actually allows you to start your business with less starting capital needs, right? Because you'll need to be able to support yourself for 2 years under the startup visa, and in which case you'll need to actually still spend 5 million, you'll need to be able to budget 5 million yen for a business entity within the startup visa type. Versus the business manager visa, where you spend the 5-10 million if you've got 1 or 2 co-founders on a business entity. You both get 1 year, right? You could have 1 co-founder as a business manager, 1 as an employee of the business. That's perfectly fine, and it's maybe easier to apply like that. You get the business up and running. Within 3 to 6 months or so of the business being in operation, you should have some bank accounts, and you'll be able to, one of you, potentially if there's 2 of you, is working on bank applications, getting the business entity kind of set up and maybe networking. The other one can be, validating the market problem, building an MVP, prototyping. Right. So these are all just kind of things to keep in mind. Let me know if you need a little bit more clarity on anything that I covered in this video. It was kind of all over the place, but hopefully it was able to provide you as a potential, prospective Japanese entrepreneur some value, and give you a little bit more of the perspective of somebody who's out here working as an entrepreneur, and help you to make a better decision as to which visa application to apply for. Thank you so much for watching. Again, if you have any comments, questions, comment. And if this video was helpful, please consider subscribing. Thank you very much.